sure, you're getting inoculated, so to speak, with the pollens to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Homeopathic response, yeah.
Indeed. And that kind of leads me into some of these other questions, and you're gonna have to help me out with some of these. Here's a question that says, and I'm kind of curious about this myself. It says, "Hi, Captain Jack and Cliff. My question is this. Has Cliff had any out-of-body experiences? And does he have any suggestions for getting the pineal gland decalcified and activated without the use of illegal drugs or hours of meditation?"
The latter part, no. I don't know if there's any, easy way you can pay the price, so to speak. I think we may be limited to what our pineal gland can do, in the sense that as a species now it may be about a quarter of what it used to be in size. Yeah, I've had out-of-body experiences. They're, I don't want to say easily induced, but you can get to the point where they're noticeable. They have a tendency to freak me out all the time when I rush back in. But if you do a particular kind of meditation, you learn to shift your consciousness around within your, or the focus of your consciousness within your larger field of consciousness.
Yes.
And you put it in your consciousness over into a place where there's no words. And then after a bit of time and you start to come back to it, then you'll realize just how far out of body you were, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's a relatively common experience with humans. It happens frequently. It's the root cause for such things as long drive hypnosis, where you get hypnotized by the stripes on the road, that kind of a deal.
Yes.
And you can actually have an out-of-body experience and then come rushing back in just as you're going off into the ditch.
Never a good thing.
Yes, it's kind of let's watch out for those. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
But I don't know of any easy way of getting there. The Science of Yoga book, which is one of the definitive subject matter exploration tomes that have come to us from ancient times, describes situations for some people that their karma blesses them, so to speak, and they can have the easy path towards those kind of experiences.
Yes.
The Science of Yoga suggests that about 20% of the populace has the ability, brings it with them, to have easy out-of-body experiences or be able to meditate easily, or various different, you might want to think of as slightly extraordinary powers, so to speak, in particular areas.
Yes.
So some people, indeed, they can be transported to out-of-body experiences with, the flashing lights and the various different kinds of software.
Yes.
I wrote Vortex, which allows you to read from the computer at up to 2,000 words per minute. And it does this by presenting one word at a time and letting the computer splash into the screen for you in large type.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm relatively immune from the out-of-body experience triggered by flashing lights, probably as a result of the many years of using that as a tool for focusing.
Interesting. That's really, I know that there was I think it was a Japanese animation cartoon or something like that.
Triggered a epileptic
yeah.
in a lot of people.
Yeah, the flashing lights.
The frequency of vibration, and I had to work very hard, very diligently for, months in getting the timing right on the vortex, just to avoid the kind of cycles that you could use that would trigger it. And even so, you can never be 100% sure you're going to avoid most people's triggers that way, so we have a warning on it.
Right. The visual frequency can really affect you. It's like whenever I turn on the fluorescent lights here in the studio, within at least an hour of dealing with the fluorescent lights, I've got a major headache, and I feel it around the eye sockets, and it's because there is that frequency flicker that I know it's there.
Right.
And it affects me. And I turn off all the lights, and I light some candles. Candlelight, and most people may not be fans of, running their home off of candlelight, but that seems to work the best for me, especially whenever I'm doing work on the computer or anything else. Any other type of electrical light bulb or fluorescent is the worst.
Fluorescent is terrible because of the cycles. It's exactly the case.
Yeah.
The fluorescent bulbs work by cyclically zapping a reactive gas with a charged electrical pulses, and it just so happens that they're keyed to the sine wave capacity of the charge,
Yes.
or of the type of electricity that we have now.
Yes.
So in the case of the U.S., it's 60 cycles, which of course is very, very close to the actual lower level circadian rhythm that the eyes get into when reading. And so that's why you get the headaches that originate from the eyes, and the headaches probably appear to come in from the peripheral and from the lower side of the eyes.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly
and
right.
it's just resonating with that cycle that your eyes are frequently moving back and forth in order to read naturally anyway. It's also unnatural to read from computer screens because it's an irradiated surface as opposed to a reflective surface.
Yes.
So there's a greater level of intensity there as well. So to actually aid your vision, you're probably better off with no overhead light if you've got a computer screen to read from, and then some kind of below the edge of the screen ambient light or indirect light. Candle would be fine. I don't like the idea of polluting my air, but the light idea would be great. I wonder if there's an artificial bulb that would replicate the candle light.
Yeah, indeed. And I know in 2012 they're doing away with what we know as the light bulb, and you have two choices. You have those little fluorescent squirrely ones, pigtail type ones, or you have LED lights. They're completely doing away with light bulbs we grew up with. They're out the door. So yeah, I have 24 different pairs of sunglasses, and since I was in middle school, I've always worn sunglasses, and I've gotten so good at refining of exactly what UV level to use on certain days, partly cloudy, temperature, the whole bit, that and plus I'm blue eyes, so I'm extremely sensitive to light regardless, and I avoid the sun unless I've got really, really good sunglasses on. And people have told me, don't do that, it's bad for your eyes and everything else. But I found that it's the completely opposite, actually.
Well, this is probably wise, especially these last 8 years or so, that the sun has transited from yellow to white.
Yes.
Increased its intensity.
Yes.
And it's producing a new kind of ultraviolet. So if you're ultraviolet sensitive to begin with, this is probably a good thing to avoid. However, of course, the downside is, especially now, that if you're avoiding the sunlight, then you're going to have to uptake vitamin D in supplement form to at least a couple of thousand units a day, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 units a day during the cold and flu season.
Yes, indeed. Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, let me see here. This one it goes back to the finances. It says, do you expect people to utilize ATM and point of service, POS transactions utilizing Caroline system, I believe it is?
Yeah.
Or does financial transactions dissolve? And if so, when do you expect financial transactions to stop, like i.e. month, year?
That's a real good question. If we follow because we like to take our linguistics and match them up to a real world, we always say, okay, has there been a recent example? How long did it take? And so on. The best example of a modern state collapsing around currency is Argentina.
Yes.
And the ATMs functioned for about 3 days. That's what I would expect in our case as well, that once we get to the point where we have either a bank holiday or a major drop in the dollar such that there's a panic on the financial markets relative to it. And I'm talking a panic that would involve, say, a week or more of activity around that. Then 3 or 4 days later, I would suspect that the ATMs will run out of cash, and that, yes, I think maybe the digital dollars, all of the representation of all of the supposed wealth that's stored in a digital format, just might disappear at some point. Month and day, well, the whole process really starts rolling on November 4th, according to our data of this year, and it takes a whole year for it, almost 2 days lacking a full year. And so November 2nd of 2010 is when we can say, well, by then it's mostly over, I would think.
Yes.
That the Fed, as a Federal Reserve Bank, which isn't part of the federal government, has no reserves and is not a bank, and their criminal cabal will have been, we've started the process of expunging them in 2010, and by November of 2010 it's pretty much a solid accomplished fact. There may be loose ends to tie up. So over the course of that period of time, from this November to that November, we'll probably encounter a point at which the ATMs cease to function. and banking as we know it will be radically altered, to say the least.
You know, I remember when credit cards really started to hit the mark in the sense. As a matter of fact, my father's first credit card was a Montgomery Ward credit card. And he thought, he looked at it as a novelty, in a sense. Like, okay, you have this, you can go and you can buy something, you don't really have the money for it, and they charge you a little extra. But his whole opinion and voice on it was, you know, unless you're absolutely in dire need to use this thing, it makes no sense to use it, because basically all you're doing is you're paying extra and more for something that really you don't need, in a sense. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And now the average person holds at least 5 to 7 credit cards